Hello, Playdate. This is Ryan.
This is Julia,
And that's all of us this week. This week, we will not be talking about Playdate news or indie releases.
but we will be talking about a recent catalog release called Recommendation Dog.
And we're going to be discussing this game with its art director, Julia Minamata.
Thanks for listening. Let's get started.
Julia, thank you. I'm so happy to have you here. And I'm sure our listeners are too.
Yay.
And for our listeners, if you have not read the episode title already, we are interviewing Julia Minamata, and who is the art director for Recommendation Dog. And I wanted to reach out to you specifically about that. But before we dive into Playdate stuff, I feel like we have just a little backstory to catch up our listeners on from you. I originally was introduced to your work through the Crimson Diamond, which is a sort of a Sierra online games inspired point and
Mhm.
click adventure. Maybe you can just give us the Cliff Notes version of how you got into computer gaming and creating your own before we hop into your experience with Panic and Sweet Baby Inc. and the Playdate game Recommendation Dog.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I would say that my project, The Crimson Diamond, and myself getting started with that is what kind of led to all the other things. That's a really good place to start, actually. I'm not a software programmer or anything like that by trade. I started life as a freelance illustrator. I went to art college and I got a 3-year diploma that I eventually converted into a Bachelor of Applied Arts illustration. And I worked in mostly editorial illustration, which is newspapers and magazines, for about 10 years doing freelance. I'm an illustrator first. I'm a classically trained artist first. And from there, I started to delve into pixel art and learning how to do that by looking at old Sierra screenshots. My favorite Sierra games, of course, being, things like The Colonel's Bequest. I also love Secret of Monkey Island by LucasArts. Those very specific limited color palettes, that particular EGA color palette, which is a very specific 16, well, it's not, it doesn't have to be, but the default palette is a very specific 16 colors. And kind of falling in love with that all over again because I had grown up with those games when I was a kid and had just fallen right into them, being someone who, even to this day, I'm not that much of a platformer, like twitchy, hunty, shooty type of like gamer. That adventure game style, that genre of story focused and just exploration and character driven, that stuff I immediately like glommed onto as like a kind of a bookish kid. And having kind of had a time where I stopped playing games for a while, like when I was in maybe later high school into college, coming back to it after, doing a bit of freelance illustration here and there and trying to get into the pixel art, reintroducing myself to the old stuff, and then getting acquainted with all the stuff that had happened between me being a kid playing the original, that type of classic point and click text parser adventure games, into this renaissance of indie gaming, where all of a sudden you have people who are making stuff that's just about as good as the Sierra and LucasArts stuff, but they're just one or two people, small teams. Digital distribution meant that anyone could have their game up on Steam or any other storefront. And I got super inspired by people like Francisco Gonzalez, who has made about, I think, 8 Ben Jordan games all on his own. He does every
Wow.
aspect of it. And I'm seeing somebody, a YouTuber, which a YouTuber is starting to become a thing, when I started to get into the pixel art, watching people let's play his games. Yahtzee Crosshaw's Shizo Mythos, which is another a series of games that people would play. And I eventually got around to playing too. I learned about the game engine that they both were using, which was Adventure Game Studio. And it was super inspiring to see that. I started to think, well, maybe this is something I can do because I could see what was possible. And that was really exciting for me. And that's kind of how the Crimson Diamond started. It started as just pixel art rooms here and there, and it eventually I knitted it together into some type of thing that started to slowly resemble a game. And along the way, I would teach myself bit by bit Adventure Game Studio. I'd watch tutorials on YouTube. I would visit the forums if I had any questions that I needed answering. And I kind of feel like if I had approached this like I'm going to make a game that's 7 to 10 hours long, I would have been really intimidated by that because I had no idea what I was doing. I did a bit of computer programming in high school, but it was like Java, and there was something called Turing, which it was a teaching program here that I think was developed in Toronto, at least in Ontario, a very basic type of programming. But I hadn't had anything like that for, more than, a decade and a half or a couple decades. And slowly teaching myself at Adventure Game Studio, which is a really approachable game engine, and getting access to this wonderful community of people. I started to teach myself how to animate, teach myself scripting and functions and all that. And the game started to kind of congeal almost on its own, and the story started to come together as well as I started to think about the setting and the characters that would be in there. And that's kind of how the Crimson Diamond got started. And from there, I started to get involved in other aspects of the game industry and starting to meet a bunch of different people. I could keep going. I feel like I got a roll on. Do you want to ask any questions before I move on to
Yeah, I do. I
that?
didn't want to
Okay.
interrupt.
Oh, please, please, please. I'm
You
so
were doing
sorry.
great. But yeah, actually, I did have a question about, taking it way back to
Yeah.
your art school days, and you said that shortly thereafter you were working for a newspaper. Were you doing graphic design or layout or illustration, or what were you doing for newspapers straight out
Oh,
of
it was in-house.
college?
It was not an in-house position. It would all be freelance stuff. It would all be contract work. And when I mean contract work, I would mean extremely short-term contracts. It would be, 24 hours. You turn around a piece, or you'd if it was like on for a monthly publication, you would get a bit longer. Our weekly news magazine is called Maclean's here in Canada, and I did like a monthly illustration for them for about 7 or 8 years, but it was all freelance. I mean, I never went into the office, and I never met the art director I've been working with that whole entire time. I spoke to him once on the phone, maybe,
Huh.
but it was all done by email.
That's
I did
so
so
interesting. Do you have any of your newspaper illustrations available to see online
Yeah,
anywhere?
absolutely. Yeah. If you go to juliaminamata.com, I have kind of like a landing page where it shows, links to Recommendation Dog, which we'll talk about later, the Crimson Diamond, and my old Julia Minamata illustration portfolio site is also there's also a link to that. And I have a lot of my old published work on there. There's a lot of McLean stuff. I've done dozens and dozens of McLean work over the years. Also, I worked for National Post, which is our kind of like one of our newspapers that we have here in Canada. I've done a couple illustrations for the New Yorker, for Business Week, kind of all over the place. Um, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. I got a lot of really good experience. And I don't know if you're looking at the work right now, but you might notice that I do have a very flat art style. I use a very limited palette anyway. When I was doing some of my earliest editorial illustration, I was doing silkscreen printing. And silkscreen printing I was using maybe maximum six colors, six passes of colors. And I was actually using tonal dots to get in other colors and things like that. And using a limited color palette in pixel art, I kind of really did gravitate toward those limited palettes because that's kind of what I liked to do, and that's what I liked to create in my own work anyway. In fact, I found the EGA color palette liberating because I got all of a sudden I got access to 16 colors when before I was doing either black and white or gray illustrations, or yeah, it was six color silkscreen printing
Yeah,
illustration.
16 is way more than
Oh
six
yeah.
colors.
It was a whole
That's
new playground. Yeah.
That's awesome. Wow. I am looking at them right now, and these are really great. We'll make sure to link to juliaminamata.com in today's show notes. So if anybody wants to check these out, you can. The link is over to the left-hand side as you enter the website, Julia Minamata Illustration Portfolio. Uh, cool. Thank you for
Of
taking us
course.
through that. And I thought surely there must be some sort of a heavy art background for you because the Crimson Diamond is so gorgeous. I
Thank
I
you.
love looking at those illustrations and images that you've created for that game. It takes me back to my childhood, and the authenticity of the colors and the pixel density, everything is just chef's kiss. So
Thank you so much.
amazing work on that. Um, with regard to Crimson Diamond, you've been working on this for 5-ish years at this point. Is that
Um,
correct?
yeah, basically more focused on it for about that long. I do have an illustration blog that's one of the links on the illustration site where you can see that I've actually been tinkering with it for many years previous to that. But I feel like I formally really started to get more serious about it was when after I first publicly showed the demo, which was in 2018, like November of 2018, I would say is when I first showed it publicly. Just the first kind of a very, very, very rough version of the currently available demo. which is was available on Steam and itch.io and Fireflower Games. But yeah, that's kind of where I feel like, yeah, from late 2018 to about now, I would say I've more been focusing on it, and also like leveling off on the illustration part of my career, because eventually started pivoting away from that because it was actually really challenging to be a freelance illustrator. I actually I couldn't really make a living doing that, and I was having trouble generating momentum, which is why I did start to investigate this pixel art stuff that I was really get I saw such incredible appeal there.
So, what are you doing for steady work now if you're not an illustrator anymore?
I've been doing contract work here and there. I've been working on off of savings as well because I would just save money, save money, save money. But yeah, I mean, we'll talk probably later on in the show about this, but yeah, I've done contract work for Strange Scaffold. There's Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator. There is Witch Strandings. There's Recommendation Dog. I've worked with Sweet Baby, who produced Recommendation Dog, on other types of gigs. I've done some narrative consulting. I've done some cultural sensitivity consulting with them, and that's been a wonderful experience too. So yeah, I mean, from my own little project, I've been able to kind of make these wonderful connections in other parts of the industry and gotten to do more contract work, which is kind of like my bread and butter. I've always been used to doing contract work because of my previous experience as a freelance illustrator. But yeah, just getting to be creative and collaborating with people, which was just another thing that I'd never done before I started in gaming.
Cool. Very neat. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you have any sort of a rough estimation for when the Crimson Diamond might
Yeah.
be completed? Right now we have a beta available to us, but is there a projected timeline for a this is done
Yes, this year. This year.
this
It's
year? This
yes.
year is only 7 months
I
left.
know
Is
it's
that
painful. It's painful to accept that it's already May, which is basically the year's half over. But yeah, the game is 7 chapters. There's 6 gameplay chapters. I'm working on chapter 6 right now, and I'm about like halfway done chapter 6, I feel like. And it's a short chapter, and chapter 7 will be kind of like at the branching endings that you get depending on how well you've played the game, and a test of knowledge. You get a pop quiz before you
hmm.
get your branching endings. So that hopefully, who knows how long that'll take. And I keep moving back the release date because Steam asks you for an internal release date when you put something on their store page, and I've moved
Huh.
that many times. But this time I'm probably kind of sort of mean it that it will be launching this year.
Nice.
Probably.
Nice. It
Yeah.
sounds ambitious, so I understand a bit, but that's great to hear that it might be coming up here pretty soon. That's great.
Yes, yes.
So speaking of Crimson Diamond, it sounds like that maybe is what sort of led to your relationship with Sweet Baby Inc. Am I correct in assuming that?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of indirectly. First, it's kind of funny because I mentioned I showed the Crimson Diamond first publicly at something called Wordplay in 2018 here in Toronto, and Xavier Nelson Jr. was a speaker at Wordplay 2018, and I actually missed out on seeing him. Now Xavier Nelson Jr. is the founder of Strange Scaffold, and he's the lead on. He works on about 10 to 12 games at a time, I would say. He's kind of a multitasking management genius and super creative, but I kind of missed it. It was kind of like, yeah, like ships passing in the night. I saw that he was going to be in Toronto, and I saw that he was giving a talk, but I was at my table showing the game, and I got really busy with that, and I didn't have anyone else with me, so I could kind of get them to take care of the table. And I missed all the talks pretty much. So I didn't get to meet him at that time, but I did meet him later at online at something called the Games Industry Gathering, which is a kind of a video call thing that would happen every week, and you would kind of get to know other people in the industry, which I wanted to do because I was just getting started. I saw him there. And then at PAX 2020 in Boston, PAX East, I did a panel, and after the panel, I just ran into him outside of the panel room, and I talked to him really briefly then. And then later on after that, he messaged me over Twitter asking me if I wanted to work with him on Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator, because Warlord Organ Trading Simulator has a very specific kind of like lo-fi green and black kind of a look. That the pixel art is very, it kind of looks retro in a way, although the game is not really retro, but it has some of those influences. And I got to work with him and Strange Scaffold on that. And then after, or during slash after that, he asked me if I wanted to come work with him with Strange Scaffold and with Sweet Baby on Recommendation Dog. That's kind of how that got started.
Very interesting. So, you were brought on as an art director for
Yes.
Recommendation Dog, but
Yes.
after listening to the official Playdate
Hmm.
podcast and some of your sound clips there, it sounded like this was a pretty new position for you. Can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I as a freelance illustrator for 10 years, I was very used to being art directed. I had never been on the other side of that. And when Zal ever asked me if I'd like to take on that role, I said, I've never done that before. I don't have experience with that before. And I was really worried about that. But I had a video call with David Bedard, who is one of the founders of Sweet Baby. And we know one of the first things out of my mouth is like, I've never done that before. I have no idea what I'm doing. And what he said was really great. And it really, it made me feel a lot more confident about it because what he said is actually um we want people who are kind of new to the industry who can learn these roles in a supportive environment. This is going to be, it's going to be a pretty relatively small project, relatively small team, and you will have this opportunity to learn in and grow into this role. And I thought that was perfect, a completely, utterly perfect first art directing experience. I got to find a junior artist to work with. Raphael was wonderful, and he was wonderful to manage. It was the first time I'd ever managed an artist. It was just a small team. Me and him were working on the art for a Recommendation Dog, and taking feedback, working in a team. Like the first time I'd ever worked on a team at all was Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator, having had all this time just completely being solo, and also being solo not only in freelance illustration but on the Crimson Diamond. It was a kind of a learning curve to be collaborative that way, but it was an incredible experience, and I love working on teams, and love that experience of not having to take care of just about everything. You get to really specialize, and of course, art is the thing I'm most comfortable with, and the art direction part kind of I think it came a little bit naturally to me just because I was used to knowing what it was like on the other side of that and knowing how I'd want to be approached in terms of what kind of art direction I'd want or what kind of guidance I want and how specific I would be with my instructions.
Yeah, so can you break down these duties a little more for
Mhm.
me between you and Raphael? Is Raphael doing all the art? Are you also arting part of Recommendation Dog? Like, who's doing what? And then maybe after you demystify that, could you also talk to us about your art directorial um, ethos? Like, how do you
Oh,
approach
sure.
somebody? Because I'm so used to seeing your art on Crimson Diamond. That's
Hmm.
all your work.
Hmm.
So I'd be interested to hear how you sort of conceptualized approaching somebody about their own artwork and changing it to suit a particular project.
Yeah, yeah. The art in the game, there's a fair amount, actually, surprising amount, because of the nature of what the game is. And what the game is you're this dog who works at a kind of an employment agency, and you're running through this rotary organizer and placing clients with these contract workers. And we actually I went into our documents and I double checked. We did about I think about 171 portraits for this
Wow.
thing. And well, early on in the design, we were talking about maybe we wanted to do kind of like a paper doll, Mr. Potato Head type of thing where you're swapping out different eyes and noses to make faces on the fly. And we eventually decided that we were just going to just do some super quick, very, very simple art for all the portraits because it was going to take a while to figure out a system of doing a paper doll approach. And the whole project from beginning to end, I think, was about 6 months, which is pretty short. And there's only the two of us artists, and so it's kind of like you have to take time to decide what you're going to do, but that takes time out of the project when you're trying to figure out what approach you're going to take. We eventually decided it was easy. It was easier just for us to do the 171 portraits, and out of the portraits, I did about 67 of the portraits, and Raphael did about 104, give or take.
Oh, interesting. I would never have guessed. They look like they're from the same hand. That's really, really interesting. Did you have some sort of a template to work from,
Yes,
sizing, any
yes,
stipulations for those portraits? I know most of them have like sort of an absence of facial
yes,
features,
yes.
but can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing about the one of the challenges about this was, yeah, it was a very quick, relatively quick and small project. And we knew that we wanted to develop all of these portraits, 170 plus portraits, and we wanted them to look consistent. And yes, I did come up with a template. The Playdate screen is actually, it's very high resolution for its size. It's 400 by 240 pixels, but it's 173 pixels per inch. It's very, very fine. But what I decided is, well, in pixel art, one of the major factors in terms of production time and complexity is the resolution you're working at. What I decided pretty quickly was that we're not going to do super fine detailed pixel art because that's just going to blow up if every portrait takes 2 hours versus every portrait takes 5 hours, you're multiplying by 170 and it becomes completely unwieldy to do that. I decided immediately that I'd be doubling the size of the pixels for the display. So we were kind of working more with like a 200 by 120 display, and that's why the pixels are as chunky as they are. There are other games in that you can get in a Playdate which have this gorgeous, more fine-tuned, very fine lines type of art. But immediately I knew that that wasn't going to be possible with the timeline and the budget that we had. Um, and also, when it's a lower resolution, it's a lot easier to make things look more uniform. I built a template and I had some design instructions for Raphael where I said, we want to keep these really simple, but I don't want it to be like, because there's so little detail on the faces, and the only real detail you're getting is kind of like what they're wearing and their hair and their, accessories and things like that. I don't want them to be mirrored exactly. I don't want any perfectly symmetrical portraits because that's going to make them look more mechanical. And it's fairly easy to like maybe mirror them to start, and then creating a bit of asymmetry in the portraits wouldn't take very long. But yeah, I mean, it's a huge consideration when you're thinking about time per portrait because you have to multiply everything by 170 when you're thinking that way. And yeah, Raphael did the lion's share of the portraits. For the rest of the design, I for the most part took care of the rest of it, except for some of the animation. When you get a correct or incorrect job placement, there are like animated X's and things like that. So that's Raphael did those as well. But I did sort of the main animated title card, which you see when you're scrolling and you pick recommendation dog, and there's a bit of a dancing font animation. The start screen, the interior of the office was another thing that I did, which was just a scrolling screen. You look up and you look down, which is something that I had never done before. The amount of information that we needed on the screen was actually quite a lot, because the contract workers had these different attributes. So you had to have, however many, was it 6 attributes or something? And the scale of, 0 to 10 for the attributes and their name. And we wanted to make sure that we didn't use too small of a type, because we wanted this to be very accessible to people, who might not be able to see that well. The screen itself is not backlit. We wanted to make sure it was ultra legible for people, which meant the fonts had to be quite large. And that also presented a problem because you don't want everything to look squished. There was a real challenge in information design of the game, because also there's this hourglass that's ticking down because it's indicating how much time you have left to make your selection. And of course, there's also this aspect of people coming into the office and them delivering their requests and things like that. There's also if people do get to it, there is a little ending cutscene, which if you complete all your rounds successfully, and I took care of that as well. Yeah.
Very neat. Yeah, one of the I hope I'm not spoiling anything here, but it's one of the few times we get to see the dog, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I thought that scrolling environment from when you look up to see your customer and then looking down at
Mhm.
the rotary organizer,
Yes. Yes.
um, it was really seamless and worked quite well.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Is was that scrolling screen your idea, or did that come up in a group setting, or how did that come about?
I can't remember. I reviewed the design document that we did have in preparation for this, and it didn't really, I don't really remember if it said anything in particular, but I think pretty early on I did realize that that would be something that would be necessary, just because of, yeah, the size everything had to be legible, and just the amount of information. So that happened pretty early on. Yes, and speaking to kind of the design philosophy behind the art direction for the game, what I love about the Playdate is it's black and white. It's incredible. I when I first started illustrating, my first love was, yeah, like comic books and manga and all that. So black and white is this gorgeous to me. And the idea that I'm working on this thing that has is only black and white was incredibly appealing. And that was another challenge, of course, because I talked about how much information has to be on the screen. Well, we also have to make the information look clear, and we only have black and white to do it in, and a very specific resolution and specific dimensions. And that kind of got me thinking about the contrast, because contrast is all that we have really to work with here. And I was thinking a bit about, well, I think one of the first reasons I started to think about the idea of darkness and lightness in the scene was one of the things Xavier wrote in the design document was that we, first of all, we needed a minimal pixel portraits. And also for the clients that were coming in, he said, we depict the presence of a client, but not the client themselves. This is for budget reasons. Imagination is the greatest production resource of all. There was already an idea where we didn't want to be that specific with the people coming in, because we made about 20 clients that would come in through the door, but we couldn't make them super specific, and we couldn't make the contractors super specific either, because it would seem really kind of limiting. And when he mentioned this idea of depicting the client and not depicting them, one of the things I thought was, okay, maybe we're just going to see like their chin down or something. We're not going to see the face. But design wise, that wasn't really working so well. I think I'm the one who came up with this idea of like the silhouette coming in through the door. This idea of you're only, and that was great from a production standpoint too, because you only have to do the silhouette and don't have to worry too much about what they actually look like and all the line work and all the details you could possibly squeeze in. But this idea of the way the light was shining in through the windows, and when the door bursts open, the light is bursting in from the outside, and you're kind of this dog at this desk, and you're kind of, it's cozy and stuff, but you're kind of in the darkness, and you're not seeing all this detail, because that was definitely a positive production note. But the idea of that contrast was what was really appealing to me, and using a lot of the dark on the screen as a way to kind of give that impression, which is not an approach I'm really used to, because of the Crimson Diamond. Of course, it's much more colorful, and the pixel is much more dense pixel wise. But yeah, I mean, speaking of the kind of the ending, no spoilers or anything, but the conception of the ending. Well, I guess, can I spoil it? Will you allow me to spoil the ending, or should we not?
I am the one host of the podcast who does not mind a spoiler. So if anybody listening is afraid of spoilers, maybe turn it off for a few seconds. But yes,
Okay.
let's hear it.
Okay, well, the idea for me, Xalavier wrote for the ending is, he wanted the ending to be, recommendation dog gets to go home with a family. The recommendation dog jumps into their arms. But for me, what I wanted at the very ending is I wanted him to actually get to go outside, to leave the darkness and go out into the light where there's the people and all that stuff that he's sending people out to do, sending the plumbers out on assignment, sending, singers, and sending psychologists and sending personal trainers out into that bright world that he's not getting to go into. The ending is you get to go into that world too. And that's what I wanted to kind of be a nice kind of way to tie up all the theme of the dark and the light, and getting to go out on your with your loved ones.
Very cool. Yeah. I think it's so interesting to hear you talking about the logistics behind the artwork, like essentially cleaving the resolution of the Playdate in half so that things are much more clear, and so that it's much quicker to produce each portrait and each client that's coming in. I was under the assumption that because I know Sweet Baby Inc. is very interested in giving opportunities to underrepresented
Mhm.
designers and programmers, that the lack of detail was so that hopefully more people could see themselves in each of these portraits and clients that are in silhouette. But it sounds like, at least from what you're saying, that it was more of a concern for time and budget. Is that correct, or is it sort of an amalgamation of all those things?
We definitely took diversity into consideration in the depictions of the characters. We wanted to be very conscious about depicting all kinds of age groups and ethnicities. The thing, of course, the challenge is being you don't have a face, right? So all the other stuff surrounding like the hair, the way the hair was, we've got someone with a headscarf, we've got, all these other different way to depict like culture and like age and all these other things. But yeah, the challenge of having diversity, but also having that blank face, and also like the black and white. I mean, there's only so much you can do. Like, we're not going to be able to really represent too much altogether. But even with like the clients who have a full body silhouette, we wanted to have a range of body types, a range of ability, all these things. Because yeah, what the benefit is of bringing these people in from all these diverse backgrounds to work on something is you have this desire to reflect that diversity in the project that you're making. And of course, the end goal being hopefully is that when people are playing it, you get a more diverse, selection, like broad audience of people who will also see themselves in the game that you're making. And so it's kind of like a win-win situation. Yeah, Sweet Babies really, really concentrates and really celebrates and champions people who don't have a lot of the game experience and getting those first game credits. And it's so vital to get that opportunity to get your foot in the door. That yeah, they've been absolutely wonderful to work with all the way through this.
Yeah, and even as a player, it was so refreshing to see diversity within a game, that it wasn't just another white male being depicted. There's plenty of those. So it was really a joy. And to touch on one of the things that you were mentioning earlier about legibility, this podcast is put together by a group of three friends who are all in their 40s. And so one of the things we mentioned is legibility. Like, could we
Hmm.
see the thing? And that was one of the things we mentioned about recommendation dog, is that it was quite legible.
Good.
And I think that all these things you're citing, from thinking about contrast, the lights pouring in, there's a silhouetted figure, it's very easy to see. But then also, even as you hop down to the rotating
The
decks,
rotary
thank
organizer, yeah.
thank you, yes.
Yeah.
um that was super legible too, and at a very fast clip.
That's
As you're
super key.
rotating through
Yeah.
that, you had to be able to look at it at a glance and
Yes.
make a quick judgment as a player about if you were going to accept it or not. So anyway, hats off to you and the
Thank you.
team for making
Thank
that
you.
happen.
Yeah, that's definitely, I did want to touch on that briefly too, is yeah, the idea that not only because of the way that the Playdate screen is designed, but also the way that the game is designed. It is speed is a factor, and legibility is very important when you're flipping through the rotary organizer to select the proper card. And it was extremely important to us that would be something that was easy to do.
Yeah, yeah. It also made a lot of sense when you started talking about cleaving the resolution of the play date so that there's less to work with. I feel like I have a much greater appreciation for that statement after having tried to produce some pixel art on my own. I've been doing this like 16 by 16 pixel grid exercise where there's a bunch of different animals to create in 16 by 16. And then at the end of the month, it bumps up to 32, and it
Oh,
doesn't seem like it's going to be all that much, but there's 4 times as many pixels.
yeah.
And I was so surprised at how daunting those
Yes.
additional 16
Oh my
pixels in either
goodness.
directions were. So I completely understand you talking about pulling the number of pixels down so that you're basically working with quad pixels instead of single pixels on the play date. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's like I guess it's what logarithmic scale
Mm.
of complexity when you're basically just doubling everything.
Yes.
Double. That's also something we thought about in when we started working on Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator.
Mm.
Is there are these trader portraits and these organ portraits. The organs are these little inventory display icons for like hearts and lungs and things like that. And originally I was trying to squeeze it into 16 by 16 pixels. I was trying, but I said I can't. I can't like what we're trying to depict. I can't. So we bumped them up, I think, to 25 by 25. But we started smaller because the idea is if you can get away with doing it smaller, it's going to save you so much time in the long run. And also the portraits for that game were, I think, 50 by 50 pixels. And of course, just green and black again, like just the one color you get to work with. But absolutely, I'm a big fan of trying to just make everything as simple as possible, because if you can convey the idea and the information, that way, you're going to really be grateful because there's so many other things to do in a game beyond just the art
Well,
that
that surprises me because your environments and character design for the Crimson Diamond are so rich. Like uh, I would not expect those words to come out of your mouth after seeing your artwork for the Crimson Diamond.
well,
Uh,
here's the difference with Crimson Diamond is that I don't have a publisher. I'm self-publishing. I don't have anybody else's deadline except for my own. And I'm basically like self-funding this. And so when you're working with other people's money and other people's time, you're working on teams, that's when you got to really and that's a good thing. It's a double-edged sword, right? Because I could spend forever just tweaking everything in the Crimson Diamond and making it as perfect and gorgeous as possible, but then it's just never going to come out. But on the flip side of that, yeah, you have these time pressures. You have, bottlenecks that happen in production and workflow where, okay, well, everything's being held up by this one thing. Well, we can't have that happen. And we need to plan everything and communicate everything and make it so the other artists can do the stuff too. And also we need to be able to finish this when we said we were going to finish it. And that's almost when I was doing freelance illustration, I always figured that the number one thing is it has to be on time because it's going to press. The thing is going to press. They can't, it's going to be blank otherwise. It's almost like it. This is not the way it is in games because games have a lot of course, are a lot more involved than in just an illustration would be. But it's better to have something in that empty space, and it being good is like a bonus, and being it's like a secondary consideration. It has to be on time, and I've always been super super good about keeping to other people's deadlines, which is great. But then when I'm left to my own devices, it's easy to fall into that the rabbit hole of just I want to just go back and fix everything. Well, you can't. It does need to come out eventually, and so that's a lesson I have to learn on my own too.
that's really interesting. I would imagine that your experience with newspapers early on in your career probably has something to do with your respect for deadlines.
Oh, absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely. But even still, I was working, it was basically me on my own. But like when I'm starting to work with other people, that feeling of obligation becomes compounded because I don't want to hold anybody else up. I don't want to disappoint these other people that are counting on me. Like that is absolutely like an absolute no-no for me for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, speaking of working with other people and Sweet Baby Inc. and your first art directorship, I'm curious, has this position opened you up to any additional offers? Are there new art director jobs or game designing jobs that are being opened up to you because of this experience with Recommendation Dog at Sweet Baby Inc.?
I
Or is
would
it too soon to say?
I think it's too soon to say. It just recently got released onto the Playdate catalog, which is of course their on device e-store, which is it's free though. That and Real Steel, which are both produced by Sweet Baby Incorporated, are totally free on the Playdate. You don't even need to fill in, I don't think, any credit card information to even obtain those ones. So it's a bit too early to tell, I think. But yeah, I would really love to do more art direction if possible. And I also really my first love, of course, is making the art in the first place. That's kind of where my heart is. I would love to do more pixel art. I would love to do more, limited palette pixel art, EGA pixel art, any type of other art. I actually recently got to work with, I mentioned Francisco Gonzalez as someone who really inspired me because he's been making adventure game studio games for years and years. I actually got to create some art for his game that was it's kind of pixel art but almost kind of not. It almost looks like hand tinted Victorian watercolors engravings, which was really a really nice thing to do. I love doing stuff like that with collaborating with other game developers and getting to do some work for them. But yeah, it's kind of interesting because uh, in a way, I'm looking forward to releasing the Crimson Diamond because it's the culmination of years of learning and years of like effort. But at the same time, I have no idea what I'm going to do after this, and it freaks me out. I like to know where I'm at. I like to know what I'm doing, and just kind of not knowing it should excite me, but it's just terrifying actually. But I'm hoping to do, yeah, maybe more contract work, maybe something, maybe full time at maybe an indie studio or something would be great doing pixel art, or other type of art. I don't know what I'm going to be doing depending on how well the Crimson Diamond does. The ultimate, of course, would be I'm going to go right into have a bit of a break and also have to fix all the bugs that people will inevitably find after launch. But I would love to continue to make my own living, making my own projects for sure. And also getting to work on contract stuff like with Zalavir and Sweet Baby, all that stuff would be really awesome. But yeah, I don't know. That's another reason why I think it's so important for me to, get to work every opportunity to get to work with these wonderful people, because who knows what's going to come around the corner. I certainly don't know, and I should learn to see that as a positive.
Uh, as a planner, I
Mm,
understand that can be trepidatious.
yes,
But
yes.
I would think that once you release the Crimson Diamond in its entirety, that's going to be one heck of a portfolio piece. And if that doesn't get you work, I don't know what will. It's incredible. Uh, Before we sign off here, I did want to touch base with you about one thing that is near and dear to my heart, which is pixel art cross stitching.
Hmm.
So I've done some of this myself, and then lo and behold, I saw you were working on a cross stitch project featuring a scene from the Crimson Diamond.
Yes.
So is this your first foray into pixel art cross stitch? Have you done this before? How did this come about? I've never really been able to chat with you about it like this before, so I'd love to hear your background on cross stitching.
Of course, yeah. I'd never done cross stitching before. The only reason I had actually gotten started with the cross stitching was I think for a Christmas I was given one of those craft magazines, and sometimes these crafting magazines have these little projects in them, and the little one that was in this particular crafting magazine was like this cross stitching little um like Christmas tree that you could then stuff with cotton batting and then make it into like a 3D little Christmas ornament. It was the cutest thing ever. It was my first time I'd ever done any type of cross stitching. And then I looked at it, and of course, I'm like, naturally the light bulb goes off in my head. I could really do maybe some like pixel art with this. This is absolutely perfect because the Ida cloth base is grid based, of course, and the embroidery floss comes in the hundreds of colors. I kind of started to look for the EGA palette in the embroidery floss, I think about that challenge and trying to match up colors. Not only just it's not going to be screen accurate, we know that, but trying to get the colors that are going to work together well while trying to be as faithful as possible to what we see on the screen. That was definitely a journey. I think I've settled on a particular palette, and I'm like having the time of my life. I've done, I know this is not going to be a video podcast or anything, but I don't know if I've been tweeting some of those. Oh, they're getting oh no. Anyway, you can kind of
Wow.
see some of those.
So Julia is currently holding up a number of cross-stitch portraits
Yes.
from the
Yeah.
Crimson Diamond, and I saw the one of your main character, but I didn't
Yes.
realize you'd done half a dozen of them. Those
Yes.
also look quite large. Like how many pixels by pixels or squares by squares are each of those portraits?
These ones are, these are a one-to-one reproduction of the screen.
But number of pixels by number of pixels per portrait,
Oh,
would you
I'm
say?
not. Ooh, like maybe
Are they about
60. I don't know. That's a good question. I'm not sure. I know that the room is almost 200 pixels, like which is
uh,
it's getting blurred out. But the room is about 200 pixels. I would think maybe like 60 or something.
okay.
I'd have to get back to you on that. But I'm now thinking after I finish the pixel art room that I'm doing for the Crimson Diamond, I want to start doing other EGA games because now I have the palette locked down, at least the one that I like. I've been playing. I do streaming as well. I stream on Tuesdays, Crimson Tuesdays, where I do pixel art for my game on stream, which is non-spoilery. So if people do want to watch that, I don't spoil any of the story details. I'm upgrading introductory sequence art, and it's oh, I lost my train of thought just then. Um, because I just had a ding, and all of a sudden I'm all at
Upgrading introductory art for the Crimson Diamond.
Yes, I'm updating introductory art oh yes, yeah. So not only am I updating introductory art for the Crimson Diamond, but I also do Let's Plays. And I've been Let's playing EGA adventure games, the same color palette, but like from other studios and especially from like the late 80s and the early 90s, that same era. And I've been having a lot of fun and really appreciating the way that I'm getting to see other game developers solve the problem of the resolution and the palette and how they show things and how they do their UI, I guess, the user interface and all those different problems and how they're solving them. I find very fascinating, and I'm a big fan of seeing the different styles of EGA art. And I think my next one will be a Legend of the Sword, little cross stitch.
Very neat. Yeah, just to give folks an idea of pixel density here, um, the cross stitch I'm currently working on is a Mega Man 2 stage select screen where there's this like 3x3 matrix of bot baddies,
Yeah.
and every single one of those bots in the frame is roughly 50 pixels by 50 pixels,
Right.
plus or minus. But each one of those has taken me roughly a month to produce. And you've got portraits there that look like they're even bigger than that. So to produce 6 of those, I would imagine that's taken you a while to produce.
Yes, yes, they do. You know what's funny about cross stitches? People ask, "Oh, you're gonna sell that?" And I'm like, "I can't. It took too long."
Just so much time invested.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I would love to sell little cross stitch kits where I have my, some the embroidery floss hand selected and a little square of Ida cloth for people if they wanted to go for that. But the actual labor involved is it's way too much to monetize that, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great idea to either sell kits or
Yeah.
PDF patterns or
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
Seems a little
Yeah.
more accessible than actually making a whole bunch of them. Very cool. Well, Julia, thank you so much for your time today. This was really a pleasure. I also wanted to open up this forum to you to chat with our listeners about anything you wanted to. Is there anything that I did not think to ask that you wanted to put out into the Playdate sphere for folks to know about?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I can quickly talk about kind of how the Playdate, how much I love the Playdate, I guess. I guess we can talk about that. Um,
Do you
bec
have your own physical
oh
Playdate
my
yet?
goodness. I have two.
Fantastic.
Okay, so what happened with this is when I first started streaming, Cable Sasser, who's I guess one of the founders of at Panic, you just never know who's watching. And he was watching one of the streams, and I found a tool in Photoshop that I hadn't known was there, and I've used Photoshop for 20 years or whatever. And so you think you know something, and it was something that was really something I was doing a workaround to achieve the same effect, having no idea that the answer to my, what I needed was right in front of my face. And someone in chat told me how to do this, and it kind of blew my mind. And he found it super relatable in terms of like, yeah, you just never know. You never know, your software perfectly. And he asked me for permission, and he put this like clip together of me discovering this tool for the first time. And he got in touch and said, really like your work and stuff, and would you like to make a Playdate game? And I said, I'd love to make a Playdate game because as soon as I saw what the Playdate was, I'd known about it before he even contacted me. This, the form factor, and just the idea that it was just going to be a little like a bit of a throwback device, and I'm kind of all about the throwback devices. And having had a lot of fond memories, I even brought like, yeah, I mean, I knew this wasn't going to be video, but I mean, my original Game Boy, I've got the Game Boy Advance, I've got, the DS and everything, and just the fond memories around those consoles. This idea that there was going to be this new thing that would have new games on it kind of blew my mind. And when Cable invited me to make a game, it completely jumped on the chance. He sent me one of the developer models. And not soon, I think soon after that, though, that's when Zalaver contacted me about making Recommendation Dog. And I thought, okay, well, this is perfect because I already know I want to, and I've already kind of been asked. And so, yeah, let's totally do this. I do feel like I still owe Cable a game, though, because I didn't make one completely on my own. I made Recommendation Dog with a team, of course, and I would like that's one on my bucket list of things to do after after I launched the Crimson Diamond is to make my own Playdate game. I would really love to do that. Because what excited me and what kind of brought me back to gaming was this explosion that I mentioned of indie gaming, of this digital distribution, of the more approachable tools. Like, Adventure Game Studio is free. It's freeware. It's you can make games in Adventure Game Studio and sell them. But this idea that there can be a handheld console that you could easily develop for. It's just so alluring. It's an amazing, and I don't really follow this stuff too much, but I don't know how often that's done, and the way Playdate's done it, where you can sideload these games, you can try to sell your game on Playdate catalog, but on itch.io you can find tons of games you can sideload, and Playdate never sees a dime of that stuff, really. It's so admirable the way that they've approached developing for the Playdate. And that first wave of, oh my gosh, you can make anyone can make a game and kind of sell that game. Well, now anyone can make a game for a handheld console and sell it. And I think that's so exciting. And that's another reason that I love the Playdate so much. It's really opening the door for people to have that experience of having that little handheld portable gaming device, and like we had back when in the day, but only better. You know, yeah, I mean, and people like you who also, I'm assuming you love the Playdate because you have something called the Hello Playdate podcast. Um, but yeah, having this opportunity to just connect people who have the same like keen love for this type of technology, and being able to develop something easily for something like this is completely intoxicating. I would say it's a wonderful thing, and just everyone that I've met who's been passionate about Play have been wonderful people. So thank you for having me on and giving us this space to chat.
Of course, yeah, yeah, and we at the Hello Playdate podcast share your sentiments. Of course, we love the Playdate, and we're constantly in awe at Panic's ability to or willingness to blow this development platform wide
Hmm.
open so that
Hmm.
anybody can create something. It's just it seems so out of the ordinary and
Yeah.
refreshing. And I think they've released some statistics, like 1 year statistics, and I think there's over 400 games that have been developed for the Playdate already in year one.
That's amazing.
That's
Yeah.
insane. That's
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
mind-boggling statistics, and
Even
it's
with
not
something
like they're
like
stopping either.
with Pulp too. I mean, they're
Hmm.
developing Pulp, which is like an in-browser. I'm sure your listeners know all about Pulp, but this commitment to, yeah, making something approachable for anyone to make a game, side load it on their Playdate, play it. Even you don't even need a Playdate to play these games. You can actually have the emulator up on your desktop, and you can blow the game up really big, or you can just play it on there. It's wonderful what they've been doing in terms of making it so anyone can play, anyone can make stuff for it.
Yeah, yeah. So just real quickly, I know you've got the Crimson Diamond ahead of you,
Hmm.
but have you opened up Pulp at all? Have you played around with that? Are you learning Lua in hopes of creating your own game after the Crimson Diamond? Like, how far into Playdate development have you explored?
I've played a bit with Pulp, like really a really early version of Pulp. I did play around with it a little bit. I do have some ideas for games. There's two ideas for games that I was definitely thinking about. Adventure games, but kind of, with a crank twist.
Huh.
Um, Definitely was thinking about that. And in terms of, yeah, there's Lua, and then I guess there's C or C plus, or I don't remember which version it is. But yeah, another thing that's on my bucket list, even exclusive of the Playdate, but just wanting to learn more programming, because I'm self-taught, and I feel like I'm everything that I've done in terms of making the Crimson Diamond work is extremely like rudimentary type of programming, and I would love to learn more programming and to make it easier for myself to make the next one, be able to do more with the game engine than I can currently do. But that's going to extend naturally to making a Playdate game, hopefully, when I get a better handle on some programming language or other.
Nice, nice. Well, I'm glad you feel beholden to cable so that maybe we can get another Julia game out of this. But
Yes.
in the meantime, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. This was really a joy talking with you, and Recommendation Dog is another joy of a game. So thank you for your contribution to the Playdate community. This has been really fun.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to connect and yeah, get to have this conversation and talk a little bit about the cross stitching as well. Um, this is yeah, this all this is kind of why the Crimson Diamond has been such a wonderful experience for me. Is that if it had not been for that, we wouldn't be talking right now. So in a way, it kind of course, I would love the game to sell really well. Of course, that's the dream. But even if it doesn't, like everything that's come along with making the game, that's not going to be taken away from me. And so I'm super grateful for the experiences that I've gotten and the lessons I've learned and the people that I've met all through this one kind of project. And that's including this recommendation dog.
Awesome. Well, that sounds like as good a place to stop as any. So, again, thank you so much for joining us today, Julia, and best of luck with the Crimson Diamond and any other future projects you've got coming down the line.
Thank you so much.